The lobby of the St. Jude Medical Foundation smells of overpriced air, a curated blend of ozone, white tea, and the distinct metallic scent of unearned confidence. It is a cathedral of glass and brushed steel, designed to make the average human feel small, temporary, and intellectually insufficient. This is the inner sanctum of the medical elite, where reputations are forged in high-impact journals and destroyed over lukewarm espressos in the faculty lounge. I stood in the center of the atrium, wearing a suit that cost more than the front desk clerk's monthly salary, yet intentionally lacked a visible brand name. In this world, if you have to show the label, you've already lost the argument. I was 20 minutes early. In the world of high-stakes accreditation, being early isn't a courtesy, it's a reconnaissance mission. I watched them, the residents scurrying like caffeinated rodents, the senior partners gliding across the polished marble with the practiced gait of men who believe the laws of gravity are merely suggestions. And then there was Marcus Thorne. Thorne was the director of admissions and clinical standards. He stood by the elevators, holding court with a small circle of sycophants. He was the kind of man who used words like synergy and prestige as if they were holy relics. He looked at his watch, a gold Patek Philippe that screamed new money, and then his eyes drifted toward me, or rather, they drifted through me. To Thorne, I wasn't a person. I was a variable he hadn't accounted for, a smudge on the glass of his perfect morning. I approached the reception desk. The woman behind the counter, a polished blonde named Elena, whose smile was as synthetic as her polyester blend blazer, didn't look up from her monitor. "Name?" she asked, her voice flat, bored, and dangerously close to condescending. "Julian Vane," I said. My voice was low, modulated. I've found that the more power you actually hold, the less you need to project it. "I'm here for the 9 a.m. review." Elena tapped a few keys, her brow furrowing. She sighed, a long, theatrical exhale designed to let me know I was an inconvenience. "Mr. Vane. Oh, right, the late-stage applicant for the fellowship. You're in the wrong line. Applicants wait in the South Wing Annex. This lobby is for board members and donors." "I'm aware of the distinction," I replied, "but my meeting is in the boardroom with Dr. Thorne." At the mention of his name, Thorne himself detached from his circle and sauntered over. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't even make eye contact. He looked at Elena. "Is there a problem here?" "He's one of the stragglers, Doctor," Elena said, her tone shifting to a syrupy, submissive pitch. "He's insisting on the boardroom." Thorne finally looked at me. He did a quick clinical scan. Shoes, cuffs, watch, eyes. He saw a man in his late 30s, perhaps looking too calm for someone seeking a position at his prestigious institution. He saw a failed applicant who didn't know his place. "Mr. Vane," Thorne said, his voice dripping with a forced paternalistic kindness that felt like a razor blade wrapped in silk. "I admire the ambition, really, I do, but this institution is built on a very specific hierarchy. You don't jump the queue because you think you're special. You haven't even cleared the preliminary peer review for your surgical logs. Frankly, your file is underwhelming, thin, lacking the institutional pedigree we require here." I leaned slightly against the marble counter, observing the twitch in his left eyelid. "Underwhelming is a subjective term, Dr. Thorne, often used by people who mistake volume for density." The air in the lobby seemed to chill. One of the sycophants behind Thorne let out a sharp, nervous puff of air. Thorne's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went cold. This was the moment where the bully decides whether to ignore the fly or crush it. "Listen to me very carefully, Julian," Thorne whispered, leaning in so close I could smell the expensive scotch he'd clearly had for breakfast. "You are a guest in a house you can't afford to live in. You are here on a technicality because one of our emeritus directors felt a pang of charity for your non-traditional background. But let's be clear, you will not be stepping foot in that boardroom. You will go to the south wing, you will sit in a plastic chair, and you will wait until someone with a real degree has 10 minutes to tell you no. Am I making myself clear?" I didn't blink. I didn't get angry. Anger is a leak in the engine of a high-performance machine. I simply checked my own watch, a simple steel piece with no branding at all. "Perfectly clear, Marcus," I said. "It's Dr. Thorne," he snapped. "Security, please escort Mr. Vane to the south wing. He seems to have lost his way." 2 guards, built like refrigerators and smelling of industrial detergent, stepped forward. I felt the pressure of a hand on my shoulder, a physical violation of the space I usually controlled with a single look. As they began to turn me away, Thorne turned back to his colleagues, laughing. "That's the problem with these mid-tier guys. They read one article in the Journal of Medicine and think they're entitled to a seat at the table. They don't realize the table is bolted to the floor." I let them lead me toward the exit. I didn't resist, I didn't argue, I simply reached into my inner pocket and felt the cool embossed card that Thorne hadn't seen, the card that didn't just give me a seat at the table, it gave me the deed to the room. I looked back over my shoulder one last time. Thorne was already walking toward the elevators, his back to me, confident that he had ended my career before it had even begun. He had no idea that in exactly 4 minutes, the failed applicant was going to be the only person in this building who could save his. The elevator doors closed on his smug, tanned face. I checked my watch again. 8:59 a.m. The execution was scheduled for 9 a.m. The South Wing Annex was exactly what I expected, a purgatory of fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. 20 applicants sat in rows of molded plastic chairs, clutching portfolios like shields. They were nervous, desperate, and young. They looked at me with a mix of pity and camaraderie, assuming I was just another soul about to be crushed by Thorne's machinery. I didn't sit. I stood by the window, watching the digital clock on the wall. 8:59 a.m. At exactly 9, the double doors at the far end of the hall swung open. It wasn't a clerk. It was Dr. Marcus Thorne, Marcus's older brother and the chief of surgery, accompanied by the hospital's general counsel, a man named Henderson who looked like he hadn't slept since the fiscal year began. Marcus was sweating. His surgical cap was tucked haphazardly into his pocket. The room went silent. The applicant sat up straighter, sensing the presence of a deity. Marcus ignored them. His eyes scanned the room with a frantic, predatory energy until they landed on me. "Julian," Marcus breathed, his voice cracking. He didn't use the word Mr. or applicant. He used the tone of a man who had just seen a ghost. "Dr. Thorne," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air of the annex. "You're 3 minutes late. I was told the South Wing was for those who didn't respect the institution's time." "There's been a massive misunderstanding," Henderson stammered, stepping forward. He held a thick manila folder, the physical manifestation of their impending doom. "The National Accreditation Board, the chairmanship handover it was supposed to be processed at midnight." "It was processed at midnight," I said coldly. "I simply chose not to announce my arrival. I wanted to see the pedigree Marcus was so fond of mentioning." By now, Marcus had appeared in the doorway, lured by the commotion. He saw his brother, the man he feared most, standing in front of the failed applicant with his head bowed. Marcus's face was a study in rapid onset neurological shock. The tan seemed to evaporate, leaving behind a sickly gray pallor. "Aris, what is this?" Marcus asked, his voice high and thin. "This man was harassing Elena. He tried to force his way into the boardroom. I had him removed." Aris turned to his brother. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was pure, unadulterated terror. "Aris, shut up. Just stop talking." "I don't think he should stop," I said, stepping out of the shadows of the annex and into the light of the hallway. The institutional pedigree, I found him quite enlightening. It's rare to get such an honest assessment of a facility's culture before the audit begins. I walked toward Marcus. He instinctively stepped back, but the wall of the hallway was right there. He was trapped between the brick and the man he had called an underachiever 10 minutes ago. "The National Accreditation Board," I began, my voice dropping to that Succession-esque whisper that commands a room, "does not just look at your surgical success rates, Marcus. We look at the marrow of the institution. We look at how power is wielded when no one of consequence is watching. And today, I was watching." I pulled the folder from Henderson's hand. I didn't need to look at it. I had written the contents. "This is the Accreditation Board's preliminary report. As of 9:01 a.m., St. Jude's status has been moved from gold standard to under review. Do you know what happens to your private equity funding when the chair of the board personally signs a non-compliance memo? It vanishes. Your donors don't buy buildings named after clinics that can't pass a basic ethics audit." Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air on a dry dock. The sycophants who had been laughing in the lobby now were staring at their shoes, trying to become invisible. "You said the table was bolted to the floor, Marcus. You were right, but you forgot one thing. I'm the one who owns the floor." I turned to Aris and Henderson. "The boardroom, now. And Marcus, bring your Patek Philippe. You'll want to keep an eye on the time. You have exactly 60 minutes to convince me why I shouldn't dissolve this entire surgical department and start over with people who actually know how to treat a human being." I walked past them, the sound of my heels on the marble echoing like a rhythmic execution. The hierarchy hadn't just flipped, it had been demolished. As I reached the elevator, I heard Aris's voice, hushed and furious, directed at his brother. "You idiot! You just insulted the man who decides if we still have a license by the end of the week." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, alone. I didn't look back. The failed applicant was gone. The chair had arrived. The boardroom was a tomb of mahogany and silence. I sat at the head of the table, the seat Marcus had occupied for 5 years, while the leadership team sat huddled at the far end like schoolboys in a principal's office. The power dynamic in a room is a physical thing. You can feel it shift like barometric pressure before a storm. "Let's look at the data," I said, my laptop screen flickering onto the massive wall-mounted monitors. Over the last 36 months, St. Jude has seen a 14% increase in administrative friction complaints. Talented surgeons from non-Ivy League backgrounds are being throttled in their second year. Meanwhile, the legacy hires, sons of donors, nephews of board members, are being fast-tracked despite higher-than-average post-operative complication rates. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. 14% sounds small until you realize it represents hundreds of ruined careers and thousands of compromised patients. "This isn't a hospital anymore, Aris," I said, looking directly at the chief of surgery. It's a country club with an operating theater, and as chair, I find that a poor return on investment. "Julian, please," Aris started, his hands trembling as he adjusted his tie. "We can course correct, a few internal memos, a sensitivity training seminar." "I'm not here for a cosmetic fix," I interrupted. The coldness in my voice was absolute. "I'm here for a systemic purge. Effective immediately, the Admissions and Clinical Standards Office is being dissolved. All current fellowship applications, the ones currently sitting in your South Wing purgatory, will be reevaluated by an independent third-party panel I've already retained from Johns Hopkins." Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally found his voice. It was a desperate, jagged sound. "You can't just dissolve my department. I have a contract. There are bylaws." Clause 4, Section 8 of the National Accreditation Charter. "The chair has the authority to suspend any administrative body found to be in moral or ethical breach of the standards of care." I've spent the last hour documenting your interaction with me in the lobby. I've also pulled the security footage of how you spoke to the last 3 mid-tier applicants. You didn't just fail me, Marcus. You failed the brand. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. From this height, the people below looked like ants, but the difference between me and the men behind me was that I knew those ants were the ones who kept the world turning. "Marcus, you're fired. Not suspended, not transitioning to a consulting role. Fired. Security will meet you at your desk. You have 10 minutes to clear your personal items. Anything digital stays. Anything with a St. Jude logo stays." The silence that followed was heavy. Marcus looked at his brother, pleading, but Aris looked away. In the high stakes of medical politics, loyalty is a luxury no one can afford when the ship is hitting the iceberg. Marcus stood up, his face a mask of humiliated rage, and stumbled out of the room. The sound of the heavy oak door closing behind him was the finality he deserved. I turned back to the remaining board members. "Now, for the rest of you, we are going to rebuild this institution's reputation, starting from the ground up. We are going to prioritize competence over pedigree and transparency over prestige. If you don't like the new climate, the door Marcus just used is still open." The meeting ended 10 minutes later. They scurried out, desperate to get to their offices to start deleting emails or polishing resumes. I stayed behind. I walked back to the reception desk in the lobby. Elena, the receptionist, was pale. She had clearly heard the news. She stood up as I approached, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Vane, I was just following protocol," she whispered. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a clinical, detached observation. "Protocol is what people use when they lack the character to be kind, Elena. You didn't treat me that way because of a rule. You treated me that way because you thought I was beneath you." I took a pen from the desk and crossed my name off the visitor log. "You'll find a severance package in your email by noon. I suggest your next role be in something less human-facing." I walked out of the St. Jude Medical Foundation and into the crisp morning air. There is a common misconception in our world that status is something you wear, a title, a watch, a corner office. But true status is the ability to walk into a room and change the reality of everyone inside it without raising your voice. Marcus Thorne thought he was a gatekeeper. He didn't realize that some people don't need a key to get through the gate. Some of us built the gate, and if the people guarding it forget their purpose, we have no problem tearing the whole thing down and starting again. I signaled for my car. As I pulled away, I saw Marcus standing on the sidewalk, holding a small cardboard box, waiting for a ride in the middle of a crowd of mid-tier people who didn't even notice he was there. He was finally just like them, only he didn't have their resilience.